Well, the whole Tarkov debacle has been really fun to watch because it turns out it is actually more than just the PvE DLC stuff. You know, things like BTRs, pay-to-win mechanics, stuff that kind of monetize bots or like monetize hacking and cheating through player trading. That's something we'll talk about probably soon, but today we've actually got the unexpected beneficiary of Tarkov's chaos, and that is a little game by the name of Grey Zone Warfare. It is a tactical milsim extraction shooter that has been, well, it's been at the top of the Steam charts since its release. It, in fact, topped the Steam charts. It topped the Steam charts, not at a cheap price, right? Like £29.50, which, I mean, it's not a AAA game, but it's certainly not a super cheap indie. Now, it has then had player numbers that have been continually rising, and in only a few days, they sold 400,000 copies, and right as we found out about that, it then turned out, actually, that they had sold 500,000 copies, and 500,000 sales at that price is just an absolutely stunning success. Now, this is a game that has been in fairly open development for a while. They've had, content creators over to play the game, and by the way, the company is called Madfinger Games. For a little bit of a TLDR about Madfinger, essentially, ex-AAA guys decided to go and do an extraction shooter. Ultimately, the extraction shooter market it's a very strange place where Tarkov has been the real big thing. There are some other smaller attempts at it, but broadly speaking, right, there hasn't been humongous competition. I mean, there are notable games there, yes, absolutely. But still, I've always thought, why has a AAA not gone properly hard into that with an extraction shooter, first game mode? I mean, obviously in Call of Duty they had DMZ, I believe they tried to do something similar with Battlefield 2042, but that's just bolting on a mode rather than, properly making something. I mean, ultimately, in my head, I think about Bohemia Interactive, the people behind Arma. I mean, there's Arma Reforger that's out right now, but you kind of think, all right, Bohemia, surely you guys could do a pretty damn incredible extraction shooter, and certainly maybe compared to Tarkov, I could see quite a lot of the Arma people actually being quite interested in Grey Zone. Anyway, let's talk about what's actually got people's attention here. I mean, number one, people want an extraction shooter. They're angry at Tarkov for very good reasons. What is this? Well, it is a extraction game that is modern military themed. It's definitely got a different aesthetic to the big players. It's moving to a Southeast Asian inspired setting. It's the sort of usual thing where you make up a fictional country and set it there. There's a lot of customization for weapons. It is really deep. Lots of player interaction. There's a big focus on the management of health via quite a few different mechanics actually, and just fun stuff like bullet penetration. So you got all of that, and ultimately the way it works is you're essentially private military companies. There are 3 factions. These factions have got bases. The map, I believe, is 42 kilometers squared. So the way that it works is you spawn in at your bases and you can sort of deploy out. In Tarkov, of course, you would go you go to a raid, but you just get a loading screen. Whereas here, it's very much trying to feel like a big open world game. So essentially, you and your people, you head out in a chopper, and basically away you go. You sort of do extraction game things. There's lots of risk-reward gameplay, that sort of thing. What they're trying to do a bit differently is the sort of MMO-style narrative stuff going on between the different factions. Honestly, pretty novel take. I'm kind of down for it. So as a player, you'll join one of the 3 factions, at least until the next wipe, that is. Anyway, you do that, and that will define who you can play games with, and also the base and the area of the map that you can leave for expeditions from, which I think is a pretty damn cool trick. It kind of gives you guaranteed friendlies, even if you're not squadding up, which should be quite good for the barrier to entry for newer players. And I think quite importantly, it's not Tarkov, and a fairly major thing is substantially PvE focused. There is in fact a PvE only mode. So that's something that people have wanted from Tarkov for a long time. There's interesting things going on in the single-player Tarkov modding community, because there is a multiplayer mod for single-player Tarkov, which basically means you can do single-player PvE Tarkov with the multiplayer mod, and well, at that point you can basically just fully mod out your own version of Tarkov. So obviously this is not that, it is something different, but for a lot of the people who wanted more PvE in Tarkov, this is obviously going to be extremely interesting to them, especially since the thing that kicked off this entire drama was the Unheard Edition's whole debacle, which is primarily zeroing in around the PvE mode, where basically the Tarkov developers tried to do the very preposterous thing of saying, okay, your $150 edition, that does include all future content, but game modes and features aren't content, hence our $250 version, which was absolutely bloody moronic. Well, I mean, we all know what they were trying to do, and to be honest, the more you dive into the details there, the scummier it gets. But today, of course, we are talking about Grey Zone. And when we take a look at the launch, it is an early access game launch. There's been about, let's say, 7,000 positive reviews versus 4,000 negative ones at the start. Reviews-wise, it is currently a few points under 70%. That is not stellar, but it is very much what we would expect from from a new early access title that I suppose is very much thrust into the limelight and therefore is really operating at scale. I mean, there's lots of smaller early access games where people know it's early access. They're not going to judge it as harshly. However, here, people are immediately wanting a replacement to Tarkov, and what this game is probably I guess, in its alpha-ish state, where it's probably not feature... Well, it's not feature complete, it's not content complete, it almost definitionally is an alpha. It of course shipped with a lot of bugs, and this meant that at the start it was extremely heavily weighted towards the negative. There were some positive reviews though, so like many similar games, especially Tarkov, it is sold at many different editions. Those are between $35 and $65, and they are including things that you would expect, like different amounts of in-game currency and storage space, that sort of thing, similar to what Tarkov does, but obviously at nowhere near a Tarkov level of price. But as much as it as a game has got lots of things going for it, as a product it's got a lot going for it, and the timing has been utterly impeccable, the negative reviews, they are there for a reason. So design-wise, people are pretty damn happy, right? Now, there are some people being able to camp landing sites, some stuff with base griefing going on. This is being flagged to developers. Similarly, what happens if you pick a faction that is different to your friends? Well, you are stuck. Or should I say were, because a lot of these things are being worked on, so you can just wipe your character and swap over to the same faction as your friends. That has been very good. That, in fact, led to a tide of positive reviews, which very much did help them. However, performance. I mean, come on. It's one of these games, you know performance is going to be an issue. So performance-wise, the minimum settings do appear to be very low in comparison to how many frames they generate. It's Unreal Engine 5. Unreal Engine 5 appears to do absolutely incredible things in limited and specific scenarios. And I'm not saying that as a knock on Epic or Unreal, it's just... Obviously, we see the very flashy demos and, nanites and all of those really cool things that are there as engine features. But making a demo that is a technology showcase and getting the maximum out of that technology and then shipping a full, complete game experience, those are very different things. So yes, for some older machines, you are definitely having a lot of problems. Then, of course, hey, it's an early access game that had a lot of players towards the start, so yeah, you can imagine there have been a lot of server problems. Then, of course, the usual pay-to-win accusations. So there are, say, several problems with the traditional model of just additional items and additional storage for higher tier supporters. It's a sort of thing I don't like. I do understand it for an early access game, I suppose. As an example, right, you can pay more money for a better edition and you can get equipment that some people are calling pay to win. But it actually turns out that if you upgrade your base, you seemingly lose the right to an automatic refund. So that's quite bizarre, and I mean, you can basically see in the table the differences between the various different editions, and it very much is a case where if you're going to be a serious player of this game, obviously it's the $65 edition. That's what it's all pointing towards. Now, in addition to this, there is a very, very long roadmap, and that has led some people to suggest that this is a game that really should have held back for its release. Now, those content creators, they thought that they were part of a marketing campaign for a pre-launch beta. They did not expect that the launch would basically be happening, a week later. And that does bring us on to the interesting topic of the launch timing. So Grey Zone Warfare really represents just a perfect example of a game jumping into the void left by a much bigger competitor. And what that basically gives you, I don't even have to say marketing spend, because you don't need to do marketing spend. You'd probably get millions of dollars worth of free marketing just from the drama. That is a very, very, very smart play. But of course, in doing that, do you risk acting a little bit like Tarkov and, chasing the money now and absolutely seizing the moment, right? Not letting somebody else's crisis go to waste. But of course, does that end up harming you? So what we have seen is their review score climb out of the 50s, it's up into the 60s, and it's continually going up. Did they time the launch? Was it going to be launching anyway? Because their overall claim is that this is like what they were planning to do, for their launch. And it just happens to be a big old case of very, very lucky timing. That's what many are saying. Some also say, okay, those are words that I choose not to believe, because you have a lot of incentives to release this game right now. Ultimately, I'm not going to make some sort of judgment on that. I will leave that up to you. I have suspicions either way, but again, it's one of those things. If I can't call it firmly in either direction, I will call it in neither direction and say that if it's lucky timing, then damn, that's lucky. And if it's not a case of lucky timing and they did pull their plans forward and essentially scale up whatever some of these creators thought was going to be like a closed pre-release beta thing, I would say, okay, you played a high-risk game, and I think in hindsight, it's probably the right game to play. And as much as you could say, oh no, their review score was a little bit negative at the start, well, the review score is going up. They're now, they're hiring staff. They're going to be able to hire many staff. They have 500,000 sales. 500,000 sales at a minimum of $35. But again, this is a case where, be it like the stash space and the other things, I would say that this is a game that will be quite good at converting people up to those higher tiers. And you look at the resources that they will have right now. Are those resources going to make the game better or worse? Will it help them to execute on their roadmap? More or less? It should be more. That being said, a lot of people will have thought about Battle State games, and they'll have thought, Battle State games, you're making a lot of money. How are you spending so much money? Because that is the other interesting little thing. We haven't really looked into it. I just remember maybe a month ago surrounding just how much money Battle State appeared to be making, stuff and spending stuff in financial statements, just how kind of ridiculously big expensive parties, things at conventions they were doing. And okay, this is totally me going off piste, but with Battle State games, right, they're incorporated in the UK, and that means you can just look them up in Company's House. And when you look them up in Company's House, you can see their most recent full accounts. You do see profit and loss numbers for the years 22 and 23 that for a game of its scale, there's one year they incur a small loss and another year it's a small profit, but it really did seem like they're spending a hell of a lot of money to not really make a lot more money. That then just led to a lot of things being called into question as various different content creators within the Tarkov space just started looking through their company reports and then just looking at stuff happening within the game. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a deeper little dive in there later. There are more things about Tarkov, just stuff that it's doing. The whole idea of oh, you can just summon in a BTR, but odd when you think about the canon of that game. Anyway, Tarkov does seem to deserve its drama, and this is a game that is well poised to capitalize on that. And I can end on something that demonstrates that perfectly. So at the bottom of my document here that I'm looking at, again, thank you, Elgato Prompter. You're amazing. I can just put our notes. I can just put our notes there. It's amazing. Anyway, the screenshot of its Steam is at 62% on my notes. When I just tab over to take a look at what it is in Steam right now, it's 67%. Okay, well, what if that ends up being, say, 72% in a week? Then you've got a game that's not mixed. So I think an extremely interesting situation. If they did pull their launch forward, I can understand them getting the bag. I can totally understand it. Let me know, though, what do you think? Have you been playing the game? Bohemia. I suppose they're all off making Arma Reforger, but surely they'd be well positioned with all that they have, all the technology for the future of Arma, to pull together something pretty good in this space. Makes me wonder. Anyway, that's it from me. It's always fun hanging out, and I'll be back tomorrow.